the hype. And we're going to have a really special conversation with a really unique leader in the medical space, in the business space, in the biotech and pharmaceutical space, who is really going to be addressing an important issue for our community, talking about the impact of sickle cell anemia in general, but also during the pandemic. Please welcome to our show, Dr. Ted Love, MD, the President and CEO of GBT. Dr. Love, thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you, Alfred. It's a pleasure to be here.
Listen, the way I want to kind of set this up, and then we'll do a deep dive later in the conversation. One of the biggest issues around what we experienced this past year, 18 months, was the fact that all the other conditions that affect us as human beings, and as Black people in particular, did not take a vacation when our systems, both physical and medical, were overwhelmed and economically overwhelmed by the COVID-19 pandemic. From your standpoint, both as a doctor and as a business leader, what did that mean for you? And you've been CEO, I believe, of GBT for now going on 7 or 8 years. What did that mean from your vantage point as a leader in this space?
Well, it was more tragic than the actual virus. A lot of things lost progress. A lot of things were delayed. And we are a community where progress is critical, and too much time has been wasted for so many things that really are due for our community. So the pandemic had a magnified effect on us, which is particularly sad.
You know, I remember on my mother's side of the family, nursing is like the big family business. Yeah. And I remember how frustrated so many of my cousins were that they were like, people like, oh, the pandemic this is early on, of course, it's not that big a deal. And then my cousins were trying to explain, for every bed we lose to that, we can't take care of the person who has breast cancer. We can't take care of the person who had a heart attack yesterday. We can't take care of the person that we're talking about, a capacity challenge that I think a lot of people didn't get right away, but people who are literally on the front lines, whether you're on the executive side or you're on the front lines, actually next to the patient in the bed, understood what that meant. To what degree was it frustrating for you in this space that it was so hard, especially early on, to get that message through as the crisis began to unfold?
Well, we'll come to this, but as you know, our company has a very innovative, very powerful product for patients with sickle cell disease. And the pandemic came literally 3 months after we were approved by the Food and Drug Administration.
Wow.
And we were just beginning to have conversations with physicians and patients, and it was going extremely well. It was going extremely well. Things dramatically changed after the pandemic. So that slowed us down, and our quest really is to help patients and save lives. So when that kind of effort is slowed down, it is very, very painful. But I would say this, we are not deterred. We've never been deterred, and we will bounce back and get back to where we want to be, which is helping patients with sickle cell disease. You
sound just like my cousins. they were like, yeah, we're telling you how rough it is, but trust me, we're not giving up. We're pushing through.
Exactly.
And they have. I'm very proud of you, and I'm so proud of so many of people who are throughout the medical profession who really did say, yeah, it's rough, but I mean, it's cliche now, but it's still true. You guys are the real heroes of this story as far as I'm concerned. So let me go back a little bit, because you are, I won't say absolutely unique, but you are very rare. You're talking about someone who's just leading a company, working in a very specialized and important field, particularly for Black people who are among the groups that predominantly suffer from sickle cell anemia. I know I have personal friends and at least one family member who has coped with it all her life. But talk to me about how you became to be Dr. Ted Love, leading a major company in this space. Did you know this is the path you want to be on when you were a young man? I always like that. How did you become who you are today?
Yeah. Well, I think, Alfred, I've been extraordinarily lucky because, as you said, the likelihood that I would end up where I am, given where I started, is low. I grew up in a family with 8 kids in the Jim Crow South in Alabama. We grew up on a small farm, lived in a very small house below the poverty level. I was extremely lucky, though, that I had an enormous curiosity to learn. And along the way, of course, I've got a lot of people to encourage me. I got some people who discourage me for sure as well, but a lot of people that encourage me. And those are the ones that I listen to. So what I really started out was this interest in science and math driving me to do something that that could help people. And the person that I saw that really represented that was the family physician. He was, of course, an African American, and he was respected in our community and admired. So I kind of said, I think I want to be like him. So that's how the journey got started. It took deviations in directions that I never imagined. But that's where it all started. It really started with a curiosity to learn, a curiosity to help, particularly my community, and it's been an amazing journey for me.
You know, that means a lot to me. I'm big into mentorship, and one of my newest mentees is actually being honored by Black Enterprise because she's a 15-year-old with a master's degree in environmental science, and she runs a STEAM camp for kids: science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And so I'm definitely going to tell her about you because she's always looking for role models to put in front of the kids that she has these programs for. But this idea of being attracted to science and math, and that leading, I mean, it leads to so many career paths that including medicine, that so it is very, very important to me that more people are exposed to people like you, especially young people at an early age, because STEM and STEAM is so important.
I totally agree. I mean, you can't do something if you can imagine it. And I think that is where we lose a lot of our potential, where our kids are not being put in front of people that inspire them to be what they can become. In fact, they're given a lot of negative messages. So I'm fully on board with anything we can do to really get young Black kids to realize that they can do anything anybody can do. It just takes opportunity and effort.
And since I brought her up, I should at least say her name. Her name is Dorothy Jean Tillman. She's out of Chicago, and she has the Dorothy Jean STEAM Leadership Institute.
I'd love to meet her.
That said, then talk to me about the transition. Okay, so you interested in science and math. You have this, you're blessed with this curiosity that at least there's enough people in your life to encourage you to pursue. You set the goal, or you see as a model your family physician as someone to strive to be, and you become an MD ultimately. Now, help me transition to yet another order of magnitude, which is to go from being a doctor, and there's a lot into that, I don't want to just gloss over that, to now you are leading a company as a president and chief executive. And of course, you had past career experiences at Onyx Pharmaceuticals and Genentech. Again, all rarefied air for the most part for African Americans. Talk about the transition from being a medical professional to becoming a business leader.
Absolutely. So, as you know, I went to medical school at Yale. And when I started out in medical school, my intent was actually to go back to Alabama and provide care locally. And when I was at Yale, people began to say, you could be a leader in academic medicine. And that's really what inspired me to get very serious about doing cutting edge research, as well as being able to provide high quality clinical care. I went on to the Mass General later, where I continued to focus on cardiology and cutting edge research. The turning point for me was my mentor, who was head of the Department of Cardiology, came in one day, called me in his office, and he said, Ted, I'm leaving Harvard to go become president of research and development for a company called Bristol Myers Squibb. And he subsequently asked me if I would leave Harvard and join him. And I ended up contemplating that very seriously. But ultimately, I decided this little company out in San Francisco was doing some of the most cutting edge, high quality science. And they were applying that science to make great innovative therapies to treat serious medical problems. That was amazing to me because I had the medical background and I had enough appreciation for science that I thought that'd be a really cool place for me to learn something completely new, leveraging the background and training that I had had. So I moved out from Boston to San Francisco, and I started at Genentech, and I haven't looked back since.
You know what the common thread, I can say this, I've been doing this show for now 2 years. Of all the people I've had on this show, all the men and women I've had on the show, is you guys are genuinely excited about what you do. I mean, I've interviewed everybody from, Marshall Thompson, the last revive me, remember the Shy Lights, to comedian Adele Givens. I mean, and it's like, no matter what you guys do, the beautiful thing is that I can see how excited you were at that opportunity. Tell me about the path you've chosen is not an easy path. Even just becoming a doctor, it's I always tell people it's all work. It's just that whether the work is rewarding or not. There's no such thing as an easy life or easy path. Well, what pushed you through along the way? What was, there had to be periods of adversity. There had to be periods when you thought maybe this was the wrong choice or the wrong path. What keeps you going on those days when you don't necessarily feel excited about what's happening? And I always ask that question because when you're successful to the world, the natural assumption, especially if you like what you do, is that, man, this is just all great. I'm a doctor, I'm a CEO, I'm a president, I got a meaningful life and a meaningful career. But there were paths along the way from being a poor kid from Alabama to where you are now that you had to navigate. So what are those elements that kept you going when you could have just said, never mind?
Well, I'm going to start with what you said, which is the people that you interview typically love what they do. They're passionate about what they're doing. And I think at the end of the day, Alfred, that is so important because, as you said, if you are trying to do something important, there are going to be bumps in the road, maybe boulders in the road, maybe bullets coming at you. So they're tough opportunities and challenges to get through. What I would say tends to keep me going is my commitment to the mission. I have always been about my goals, and my goals have generally been something bigger than me. So for example, when I was in college and I had rough days, I would just think to myself, I can't go back to Alabama and let my parents know I failed. I can't go back and let all the people who supported me from my little country environment feel that I had failed. So my pursuit to become a physician was internal because I wanted to get there, but there was also a lot of drive to not let anybody down who would put their support behind me.
That is so important. I share that. I come from a small town, from a working poor household in a working class community. And that was my thing when I went off to college. It was like, my whole town was like, that's the kid that's going to do well. And I was like, there were lots of times I was like, I don't know if I'm that kid, but I had to keep going. And like, if not for myself, like you said, for the people who invested in you.
Exactly.
And who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. I just think that's an important message, no matter what you do for a living, what you choose your mission to be. I'm also very mission oriented, hence my 30 plus years of Black enterprise. I'm real mission oriented. Talk to me now about GBT. What is the company? What does it do? What is the scope? Tell me about that company and what it does. And then, of course, I want to deep dive into your work with sickle cell.
Sure. So GBT literally stands for Global Blood Therapeutics. So the company is focused on blood disorders, but we've been very focused from the beginning on sickle cell disease. And I think you know this. I had actually retired. My wife and I bought a home in the wine country, and my intent was to not work the kind of honestly slavery hours of being a CEO of a startup company. But I got pulled into this because of sickle cell. So it was a combination of the desire to help sickle cell patients. And let me just touch on that. When I was in medical school, I saw sickle cell patients come in to Yale New Haven Hospital, and you could tell, Alfred, that people didn't care about these patients the way they cared about other patients. And there was this rush to be suspicious that their pain wasn't real, that they were seeking narcotics or doing something inappropriate. That was very painful to me as a Black person. And it was also particularly painful to me because I was just such a small, unimportant part of a big major medical center. I was in training. I was trying to get my medical degree, but I never forgot that. I never forgot that. And I saw it over again. I saw it over again when I later went to Harvard at the Mass General. And over my career, I learned that this is typical. This is the way medicine in this country is practiced. And sickle cell patients, quite frankly, are the kind of epicenter of all of the racial bias that we have in our society, and sadly, in medicine. I mean, years ago, people didn't want to believe there was racial bias in policing. I think we've gotten beyond that. I think we've accepted that.
We may not agree on what to do about it, but I don't think there's any argument anymore that it exists.
The arguments are, I can tell you there's as much racial bias in medicine.
Wow.
And I've seen it play out. So I basically said, I emotionally want to do this if the science is right. So that drove me to look at the science of what the company was thinking about doing. And I said, oh, this is brilliant science. If this is brilliant science, and that is the way to help sickle cell patients, keep them out of the hospital, keep them out of the medical center, make medicines and therapies which keep them at home, which keep their cognitive function normal, which allow them to perform in school and have the life of other individuals. So I got excited because of the science being compelling, but also it was a group of individuals who really, really needed help and had been ignored for too long.
You know, first of all, you said something that was very revelatory. I'm very, very aware, again, because of, again, my mother's side of the family, of bias and racism in medicine. And of course, that was a big part of the dynamic around how Black communities reacted to COVID, how we reacted to testing, how we reacted to vaccines, and the whole nine, that even if it wasn't rational, it was understandable because of the history of how Black people were treated by the medical and health system over the decades. That said, it was revelatory for me to think that, you know what, the central drug disorder associated with Black people would be the epicenter of the ongoing culture of racism and bias in medicine. That is revelatory to me. Help our audience to understand what the traditional quote unquote treatment, and I'm going to tell you what my fuzzy understanding is or was about it when you're talking about treating and helping sickle cell patients, and then what the therapeutics and the solutions that your company is developing that comes out with better outcomes, better coping mechanisms, and other things. My recollection was always, and I'm thinking about this one, good friend who I just knew at some point there was going to be some transfusions going on, and that there was going to be a point where there had to be something that was going to give him some relief, so he could go ahead and function and do his job and do what he needs to do. And I'd heard about little things about different medications, but not much. It was always, my thing was like, oh, he had to go get another transfusion.
Yes.
Is that still typical? And then what is it that GBT is doing and maybe other companies are doing? But let's talk about GBT because that's your passion point.
Yeah.
To basically improve the quality of life, because it's something that can be lived with if you can minimize the damage to the tissue and other things, but it's hard to live with if you don't have the kind of help that you need.
That's right. That's right. So what I would say at the outset is that we have characterized sickle cell disease as a disease of pain. And most of what we were doing when I was in medical school, and unfortunately, most of what we do today is focus on the pain. If you have cancer, Alfred, you might have pain, but treating your pain is not ultimately what we should be focusing on. We need to treat your pain because it's there, but we need to figure out, don't something about your cancer. So that's a good analogy. When I was in sickle cell disease, when I saw sickle cell patients during medical training, it was really all about treating their symptoms. Nobody was really going back, dealing with the fundamental problem. So let me tell you what the fundamental problem is. The fundamental problem in sickle cell disease is that there is a mutation on a protein, and it's only one protein in our body. The protein happens to be hemoglobin, which is inside of our red cells. The reason we have hemoglobin inside of our red cells is to allow us to carry a lot more oxygen than we'd normally be able to carry. We can carry 10 times as much oxygen in our blood because of red cells and hemoglobin. Normally, hemoglobin is soluble, like sugar in water. So if you had a balloon full of sugar water, you'd be able to bend it and do whatever you want to do because the sugar is soluble. Well, imagine I did something to that sugar that made it come out of solution and organize into sticks. Well, that nice round balloon would sickle. It would take the shape of.
So if I could take the analogy forward, sugar could be a syrup.
Yes.
Or it could be a cube.
Yes.
And the cube is a lot less malleable.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what's happening in sickle cell is you're forming these rods of this protein called hemoglobin, and that's causing the cells to lose their nice round shape and take on this sickle shape. And of course, the rods are also poking holes in the red cells and killing them. Wow. And that's why you become anemic. And I'll touch on one other thing. The reason this disease is so prevalent in the African American community is because this mutation, while it isn't wonderful, normally, it actually, if you get one bad gene and one good gene, because we all have 2 copies from our parent, from each parent in encoding hemoglobin, if we get one copy that's good and one copy that's bad, we're protected from malaria. And we're not sick. But if you get 2 bad copies, you're sick. You're not really protected from malaria either. In fact, you're more susceptible for malaria. But that pressure of malaria selected for more and more people who have one bad copy of the gene. That's really what that was going. We imported slaves into the United States. Many of those slaves had sickle cell trait. And when 2 individuals with trait have children, roughly 1 out of 4 of their kids are going to get 2 bad copies. 2 out of 4 kids will get 1 bad copy and they'll be fine. 1 out of 4 kids will get 2 normal genes and they'll be fine. But that's the price. When 2 individuals with sickle trait have children, 1 out of 4 of their kids will get 2 bad copies of the gene and they'll get this terrible disease that we know as sickle cell disease. Where I thought the science of GBT was so phenomenal was, what if I made a chemical that would bind to that hemoglobin and make it stay in solution? Stop it from sticking together again. My view was that should make the disease significantly, if not completely, go away. And that's what we worked on at GBT. So I said the company started back in 2012, really as an idea. I joined the company in 2014 as CEO, raised a lot of money, did a lot of clinical studies, and we got the drug approved by the Food and Drug Administration at the end of 2019, November 2019. So, and the reason we got it approved so quickly is that the FDA was amazed at the potential of this drug, and essentially said this drug should be approved on an accelerated basis. And they gave us labeling, which says, if you have sickle cell disease, you can and should be on this drug.
Wow.
And the only requirement is that you be above 12, because our clinical study only enrolled 12 and older. We're now enrolling younger individuals down to 6 months old. So eventually it's going to be for everybody. And again, the goal here is very similar to if you have diabetes. We want to regulate your sugar. If we can do that, that will effectively cure your sickle cell disease. Sickle cell disease is due to this hemoglobin sticking together. And the solution of stopping that event right in its tracks, that is the way you powerfully change the outcomes in sickle cell disease.
This sounds like a huge deal. This is
a huge deal.
Revolutionary. I mean, man, I mean, again, like most human conditions, you grow up almost thinking these are just some things that some people just have to live with. They don't have a choice. Like you said, deal with the symptoms, take something to deal with the pain, maybe do something more drastic like a transfusion. But this is really, again, from the people I know that have suffered from it, this is revolutionary.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, I know the pandemic disrupted, delayed, but where are you now in terms of continuing on with this process of getting this product to people that need it?
So let's kind of talk about a lot of things related to that. Okay. So we first had to prove that the drug was safe and effective. And we got that very quickly. Actually, the FDA approved our drug in less than 3 months.
Wow.
It normally takes about a year for the FDA to approve something in their review. They approved our drug in less than 3 months. So they weren't hesitant about this. Once the therapy is approved, once the medicine was approved, we began to talk to physicians. We've also talked a lot to advocacy groups, basically just getting the word out about the new therapy. And patients were seeing their physicians who were having conversations about this new therapy, and it was being prescribed. About I'm gonna say around 180 people a week in the United States were being put on this therapy. And then COVID struck, and those numbers have been cut in half. In fact, more than cut in half. And it's significantly because our capacity to educate physicians has been hampered by COVID. Physicians' capacity to educate patients has been hampered by COVID. Sickle cell patients are afraid to even go in and see their doctor because they don't want to risk getting on a bus or getting into an environment where they could catch COVID from someone. So that has slowed us down. So now as we're coming out of COVID, we are going to double down on making sure that we're educating physicians. We're going to double down on making sure that we're educating patients. I'm probably going to be flying around the country eventually, going to Black churches, going to Black groups, letting them know about this. I mean, this is why I did this. I came out of retirement for one reason, and that is to protect and hopefully save the lives of individuals with sickle cell disease. So this is our mission, and we are going to deliver on it. Then how do you get it to patients? So a couple of things. One is when patients are very sick, they many times need help just navigating through the healthcare system.
Yes.
So for many of the drugs that I've worked on, we have built what we call patient hubs, where when you get a prescription from the doctor, we actually make sure that there's a system and an infrastructure that we build and we pay for that is kind of your concierge. And so they will call you up and they will talk to you about your insurance. They'll talk to you about your copay, if you have a copay for your insurance. And if you have a problem being able to do that, any of that, we will try to fix that for you. And in fact, we have a huge effort to pay people's copays for them. Now, we can't pay government copays. Unfortunately, that's illegal. But if you have commercial insurance and you have a copay, we try to pay it all. we also know that some people don't have insurance, and we give it away. We give it to you free. If you have no capacity, no insurance, you will get our drug free. And that is important to me because, as I said in the beginning, I came at this to help patients and save lives. And if you want to do a good job of that, you need to be bringing more than just a medicine. You need to be bringing support. You need to be bringing education. You need to be bringing training, and you need to be bringing free drug when individuals really are in a situation where they need it. So we're fully in this, and we're not going to stop until sickle cell children are growing up, living normal lives. If it's within our power, we expect children to grow up with normal lives.
You know, Dr. Love, you are a literal living example of the difference that's made when we have Black people in the system, leading in the system. You know, it's very popular to kind of point back to things like the Tuskegee experiment, which obviously was very horrible, and then say, oh, well, that's why I can't trust the system today.
Yeah.
While medical bias still exists, I tell people that's a whole different world. We had literally no presence in the system, no say in the system there. And frankly, the things that didn't protect us as Black people didn't protect anybody, because there's a whole bunch of things that are totally unethical and illegal today that was totally acceptable back then. So I was thinking, you got to put that through that different lens. But when we talk about the importance of having Black people in the medical profession at all levels, at the research level, at the academic level, and the clinical levels, nurses, doctors, because it's more than the fact that you're Yale Medical School educated and you have the credentials. It's the personal connection to why we do what we do in a way that can help transform the culture of medicine. And I know that was a big part of what got you started on this path as a young man in the first place. But it's really fascinating to me, and it's perfect for this show, to see that in action with a real illness that people are familiar with, coming out of an environment where we were all confronted with the realities of the shortcomings of the medical community, both historically and presently, in terms of dealing with Black people. But then to see someone like you as like a living representation of why we need more Black representation in medicine, and why it matters. It's more than just having a brown doctor. How does that make you feel? Let me phrase the question differently, because I usually try to, toward the end of the interview, be very forward looking. What is your hope in the immediate future and then going forward, not only for, of course, the obvious stuff, the success of this drug, the ability to really treat sickle cell in a way that's revolutionarily different and effective, but for Black people in medicine, on the business side, on the clinical side, on the research side, because of what it means and the inspiration that there could be a couple of other Ted and Theodora Loves running around who'll see this interview and say, I need to get a piece of that. There's a role that I need to play. And now I can see what that looks like and why it matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking a little bit about, what would be a simple message for everyone listening, whether it's a sickle cell patient, whether it's a patient who's got heart disease or cancer in the medical system. Sheryl Sandberg wrote this book called Lean In. And what she was really trying to tell women who want to get equality or get success in their careers is that they need to lean in. I think that's completely the line that I would give. We've got to lean in. If you've got sickle cell disease or heart disease, or if your parents are in the healthcare system and you're not leaning in, I can tell you they are not getting the best care. They are not getting the best care. You have to lean in order. Well, you know that line about the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and unfortunately, I know that Black people get labeled as angry or as difficult if you lean in too much. But the alternative is to not lean in and to let people decide for you without you even having the opportunity to lean in. So I would say that if you're a sickle cell patient, I would be going in saying to my doctor, what is the latest in this therapy? What are the latest innovations? If they don't know the answer to those questions, that should be concerning to you. If they do know the answer to those questions, you can talk to them about these therapies and wonder, why am I not on the latest innovative therapies that have been developed to treat my disease? You should be doing that again with every disorder. That would be my question, is what is the latest and greatest advances to treat my problem? And you should, by the way, do your research before you go there, because you don't like to ask people questions you don't know the answers to. This is somewhat rhetorical. It's your way of, in a non-angry way,
Right.
getting your physician to engage you on the innovative best treatments for your disease. I think that's a good way to start it, but I think it's a critical thing. And patients are not getting 70%, Alfred, 70% of sickle cell patients in our country are on nothing for their sickle cell.
Wow.
Nothing.
Nothing.
They just get symptomatic treatment for pain.
Oh, man.
So we've really got to start using our new powerful drugs that are going after the molecular basis of the disease, or going after the inflammatory condition that's causing our pain episodes. We've had one drug really for years. It's called hydroxyurea. It's a repurposed cancer drug. It has a black box warning on it with skull and bones from the FDA saying this drug could cause cancer. That's the most widely used drug in sickle cell disease. It's been around forever. There are new drugs that we've invented that don't have any of that on them, and very few patients are on them. So we've got to lean in. And I guarantee you this is going on for Black people in many disorders. I'm obviously focused on sickle cell today, but I think this is going on for many disorders. And again, we've all got to be leaning in and owning our outcomes. The squeaky wheel does get the oil.
Dr. Love, I recall in mind another of my mentees, and I won't talk about her condition, obviously, or her situation, but she thought that she had something relatively minor, that she went through 7 different doctors in 3 different hospitals in 2 different states before they really found out what was her issue. And the only reason they got to it is because her parents, she's a grown woman with children of her own, but her parents insisted that can't be it. Yes. We have to talk to somebody else. We have to talk to somebody else. We have to talk to somebody else. And what seemed like a very minor thing, but wouldn't go away, turned out to be a major thing that was no longer a thing because they finally found out what it really was. And exactly. She's perfectly fine. But if she had gone with the first couple of people, it's like, she may not even be alive today. That's how serious it was. So your message about leaning in, Dr. Love, I think that's a perfect message to end this conversation on. I came into this conversation, I thought thinking I knew what I was knowing what I was talking about, and now you've taken me beyond the hype. This is really revelatory for me. I want you to have the last word here, and lean in is a great last word. But I want to hear your thoughts about my audience, our audience, the Black Enterprise audience, how we should just approach in general, and lean in, it probably underscores it, our own advocacy, self-advocacy in pursuit of better health and better wellness outcomes.
Yeah. Well, I will give you a different line. And it's a line that my father said to me when I was very young that I never forgot. And he said, Ted, it's important for you to realize that that nobody is any better than you. You're as good as anybody. But then he added on, but you also are going to have to keep in mind that you are no better than anyone else either. And I thought that was inspirational on the one hand, and telling me I've got to get out there and do what I've got to do to be successful. But I think he was also telling me that I should have some humility, and I should have some concern for my brother or sister next to me. And that has really been a wonderful balance for me to go about things really feeling like, as a physician, for example, I treat every patient as if it is my child or my mother or my father or my brother. That's how I practice medicine. And I don't think every physician holds themselves to that bar. It's a high bar to hold yourself to. But at the end of the day, that is really what we ought to be doing, right? That's really what we ought to be doing. We ought to be looking out for each other. This is a society, and the whole value of a society is we come together. And by coming together, we improve the outcomes for all of us.
And I would add, just on the other side as a patient, that's the standard of care we should seek. But we won't seek it if we don't think we deserve it, if we don't think we're worthy of it, if we think we're less than, then we'll accept whatever we get. And I think you're sending a critically important message that every life is of value. You are of value. And whether you come from a background like ours, from a poor background, or you come from a privileged background, you have the right to be treated with the best care you can get. But you got to advocate for yourself to get it.
Yeah, every life is special.
Every life is special. Dr. Love, oh my God, this is a great conversation. I know our audience is going to get a lot out of this. I'm just really excited for the future of sickle cell treatment because of the work that you and GBT are doing. Thank you so much for being a guest on Beyond the Hype.
Thank you, Alfred. It's really been a pleasure.
And this is Alfred Edmond Jr. with another great, truly meaningful edition of Beyond the Hype. Thanks for listening. We look out for you joining us for future episodes of the show.